I was like, man, I really want to teach people so I don't have to watch bad drifting. and and somebody was like, that's so rude. I'm like, no, like I don't mean it like in a bad way. I'm like, these people that are struggling on the track, I could probably talk to them in 5 minutes and like help them through a year of learning, you know? I'm like, and I feel like if everybody's better at drifting, drifting can grow, right? Because if everybody can link a track and have style and do that, that means anytime someone goes to watch them, they're going to absorb good drifting, and I think that's important in the growth of it. For me, what the best part about current drifting is, someone could start drifting that has never drifted in their life, and in about 5 events they can be better than I was in 10 years,
Wow.
which
Wow.
is like incredible to see. Like
Wow.
some people would be like, man, I had to fight through this, and I'm like, no, this is amazing. Like, it has grown so much that someone can get in a car that is set up pretty decent, has all the right parts, and there's enough education out there where they can watch some videos and go to the track, and by 5 events they're gonna be shredding out there.
That is one thing about IndyCar that nobody will really get. And it's unfortunate because there's no way of, you can go pick up a football and understand that, what Tom Brady does is difficult, throwing a ball accurately, 60 yards down the field or whatever, and getting hit by these big guys. It's more something you can relate with because you can pick up a golf club and understand you can't do what Tiger Woods does, that type of stuff. But in IndyCar, the physicality of it is incredible. You can't let the nerves get to you. You can let the nerves get to you in a positive way, but channeling positive thoughts, once you start going down a road of negativity or doubt, it'll have you. Just grips you. It's instant. Just like they say when you're driving a race car, if it gets loose, right, and you're trying to save the car, if you're looking where you want to go, you're going to go there. If you look at the wall, you're going to go to the wall.
It's crazy. Some might not know that Sterling Moss did some drifting back in the 1950s. And outside of you, Chelsea, who are Americans who have really put drifting on the map?
My previous teammate Von Gittin Jr., he's definitely done huge amounts for the drifting community, just by growing it in a mass, huge. He's done a fantastic job of marketing it. He's also one of the best drivers. We always have a joke where if he pulled up to the line next to me in like an F-350, I would be concerned because he can get in anything and wheel it to the podium. And I'm like, how do you do this? Like, his car could be all messed up from a crash or whatever, and I feel like he drives better than when it's perfect. And I think it's his positivity and what he's done for drifting has grown it immensely, especially. And I don't mean to get corporate, but especially in the business side of things, and growing it in ways to kind of pave the way for other drivers and other people that are fighting the dream to be able to be successful at it.
Well, you don't mean to get corporate, but let me ask just a couple of corporate questions. And then I do want to get into a 101 on drift competition. How much is the sport changing from a business side since you got into it?
A ton. Realistically, when I started, we were just figuring out how to do the sport. Even at a professional level, if you go back and watch videos from 20 years ago plus, it's almost embarrassing because it's not the driving was not very good. And from a corporate standpoint, I think there were a couple drivers that maybe had some background in that and were able to really maximize the fact that it was new. And someone like Reese Millen or Tanner Faust, some of those drivers in the beginning. Um, and they did. They kind of set it up so that corporate partners would want to be involved. And the thing is, like we were talking about earlier with how big drifting is, there's a side of drifting that's just like skateboarding, BMX, street riding, things like that, that is fully like sustainable on its own without a lot of corporate partners. And that's like what's great about drifting is if that's not what you're into, there are outlets. And then to compete and be professional, no matter what, there's going to have to be that. That's just how it is. It gets more expensive. You become someone who is marketable and able to grow everything, and you start working with these partners to be able to fund your dream. And then hopefully after a while you can make some money doing it. But it's been a big change lately. I think there's been some big partners that have come in and out of drifting and then back in because they realize what it is, the value of it. But at the end, like currently, I think we're at a spot where there's a really good balance of the ability for small business and other things to get involved in the best end and the highest end of drifting. Well, it still makes a lot of sense to have some of these really huge corporate companies come in and be a part of it as well.
Who wants to be a part of it now?
I think people that really want to reach the 16 to 35 market that's into cars and has disposable income. I think that's obviously like the huge market and target for a lot of companies. And this is a way to do it in a way that's like kind of fancy and exciting and it's eye candy. There's so many technical facets of it if you have a company that's based around that. And then there's just raw in your face action happening. And I think a lot of these companies, and I'm not speaking for them, but they like one of my partners, Pennzoil, they can't post some wild, crazy trip that we're doing, having fun and doing all that like from their social, but I can,
Right.
and I can promote
Yep.
Pennzoil through that, right? And I'm connecting my followers and my people that love what I'm doing with a brand that appreciates and really respects what I'm doing. So it's like that's the connection I want to make all the time, where it's like, how can I be the middleman to connect to people that you would like to have, but you're a corporate at a big, huge company, and that's a
Right.
struggle. So let me help you with that because I love your brand. I love working with you, and all the people that work there are enthusiasts. But let me be the non-corporate version of this to connect you guys with all my fans that enjoy it.
You mentioned social. I'm guessing drifting, judging by the actions of, teens or young adults, social is exactly the way to go to make this sport as popular as it can possibly be. How much has that fueled everything in the last decade or more, that you've been actively involved?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure.
I bet.
Um, I believe that drifting would be nowhere almost without it.
Mm,
I think that if we look back to pre-social, you had to really love it and know it and want to buy tapes and videos from Japan or Australia or any of these places or go on LimeWire and download it.
yep.
And that was the only real media we had. And I can tell you the group of people that I was around drifting all the time were diehard, but it was just very few, and there was very few new people coming in. And when social media started coming around, Facebook started opening up, and Instagram, you could see
TikTok.
the growth just go to the moon, because it's an eye candy sport. And now everybody can post it. The 5,000 people that are there at the event turn to 10,000 in a couple of years because they see it on social and they're nearby, and the marketing and all the stuff just grew like in a massive way.
That's crazy. Well, let's talk about a typical competition. And I know that you mentioned judging a couple of times. That takes place, correct me if I'm wrong, but on a small part of the circuit with a few linking corners, right, that provide for good viewing and then opportunities to drift. But the rest of the circuit, not as important, but it does help control temperature of the tires and setting up the car for that for the judging that occurs in the corner. Do I have that right?
Yeah, somewhat. Some of the places we use all of it. Like
Okay.
Irwindale Speedway, it's a bank. We use the big bank and the small bank and the infield. It's the road courses usually that we use part of, and it's a start and finish. And you do come to a stop every time before you restart the run. But yeah, basically the competition aspect of it. There's a seating bracket now that's based on the previous event and where you are in the standings, and that basically places you in a bracket. You'll have practice usually for about 4 hours or so of track time previous to that. And this is the competition aspect side of it, not the fun side of it. But
Yeah, right.
not that they both can't be fun. But yeah, so basically, the strategy is, or the layout is, you lead one run as a driver, and then you'll chase one run, and that the judges will decide who wins. There's usually three judges. Some of the other series have brought in up to five, just so that it's a little bit more easy to make decisions on that aspect. But it's your job as a lead car driver to do a 100-point run the best it can be. If you don't do that, they deduct you from that. And in the chase position, it's your job to basically mimic what the lead car is doing and their ability to do that. Obviously, a really, really good lead should make a really, really good chase. A so-so lead can make a so-so chase. So you can see where the judging gets a little bit difficult and complex there. But they have a basically large string of things that they're looking for, and they're deciphering what's happening on what car affects each, and then you decide a winner. Most tracks in Formula Drift are 2 to 5 turns. Some of the 2-turn tracks are really actually huge tracks, and we wouldn't make it much more than 2 turns on a pair of tires. And some of the 5 or 6 turn tracks are usually smaller so that we can actually make it through the 2 laps. And yes, it is tough to get 2 laps out of a pair of tires.
And the level of smoke is also judged, correct?
The level of smoke isn't really judged unless it's in a part where you're not making smoke and you should, and then it
Okay.
kind of tells them if you're on or off the throttle. But the level of smoke becomes a huge difficulty from the chase because you're sometimes driving through a complete whiteout, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you have to have the precision being right on their door. And, it gets to be tough. For me, I usually will take some laps during practice in the lead in spots where you can get what we call like smoked out. And I'll just close my eyes and count and open them to make sure I'm where I'm supposed to be. So that way, during the run, if I do get smoked out, I actually usually have more context to what's happening than my eyes being closed. So
Right. Right.
it's okay to drive through it and have your timing at that point.
You started this before you had a driver's license, right?
Yep.
And tell me about how you started. Was it 15 years old?
Yeah, so I got into drifting by kind of watching some videos online and playing some video games that were related to that. And when I was 15, like right after my birthday, I found a Nissan 240SX for like 1,200 bucks, and I was like asking my parents, I'm like, "Hey, I have a permit. Like I couldn't drive by myself, right? But I
Yeah.
had a permit to drive, and I was like, I want to get a car, so that way when I have my driver's license, I have this sweet car." And like I had no idea like what I was getting myself into. And basically, I got this car and I started drifting a little bit here and there with friends that were old enough to sit in the passenger seat in case I did get pulled over or whatever the case was. And then I started driving some events, and I had to have like my mom drive with me to the track so that I could drift all day and then come home because I didn't like have a license I could drive by myself. So it was interesting. It was cool. Like there were a lot of people that were very young back then that were getting into drifting and doing similar because it was like obviously spending $1,200 on a car and like a couple $100 an event is still a lot back then for a kid. But like if you just did a couple events a year, it was really enough because there weren't that many. You know, my local area would have like maybe 5 events all year.
Hmm.
So even if you went to all of them, like and you had like a job and did your chores and whatever, you could stack up a little bit of money enough to go do it. And you could go dumpster dive for some tires at the local tire shop and mount them with your mechanical arms and do all that to make it happen. But yeah, the beginning of the drift scene was definitely definitely early in it all. It was much simpler. Like if you could go and do a figure eight, you were basically a pro back then.
Right. Right. Amazing. And you were also doing stunt driving at an early age like that?
Yeah, after I got into drifting and realized that I could drive, there actually was a market for like young kids that could drive, right? So I
Ah,
started doing some movie stuff and commercial stuff that
really?
was, yeah,
Like
like
what?
I did a couple different things. I did a commercial for Hot Wheels back in the day, and like because I was at an age where like a 16-year-old could still have Hot Wheels and be playing with them, but also drive, and they were trying to reach a market like that. And some other smaller things, just little clips and handbrakes in smaller movies. And basically, whenever I could, I was always trying to go online and find on Craigslist and stuff and find little jobs driving.
Isn't that just the best thing? You're not even 20 years old and like, you're hanging out with your buddies and they go, "Well, what'd you do this weekend?" "Well, I went and drove a car off a cliff or something." I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Most of my stuff was like precision driving back then.
okay.
I wasn't the guy jumping Crown Vics out of hotel buildings or anything like
Right.
that. Um, but yeah, like just fun things in that nature were always a lot of fun, and did some road racing back then too, which I think kind of helped tie that all together.
And you got certified. That was the big thing, right? I mean, you got your pro racing license and started racing in several series. Um, you know, primarily that road racing path, right?
Yeah, and for me, I was actually working at a dealership that sold Miatas and diesel trucks. Oddly, the two
Ah,
odd things, and but he raced Spec Miata forever, and he was like, "You got to come race. You got to come race." I'm like, "Well, I think I could get a license and do all that." So like, he rented me a car, and I went and got a SCCA pro or novice permit, and then went and did some racing at Sebring, at it would have been Moroso back then, but then PBIR and Road Atlanta and some events nearby that I kind of got, the thrown into the wolves with Spec Miata, which is like one of the craziest road race series and the most aggressive and closest racing you can have. I think some of the best drivers come out of there. But that kind of gave me also some help with other things. Like, I have SCCA pro license. It's not easy to get, but it's possible. You don't have to be the best driver to get it. You got to be safe and you got to do what you need to do. But it shows that like you're a part of this and you're a lifer to motorsports. So I think that helped a lot in some of my partnerships and drifting, even just because it's a relatable thing that shows that like I'm here to stay, kind of thing.
These days, you're still involved in teaching, correct?
Yeah, I do a lot of instruction, chassis setup, engineering, things of that nature. I feel like one of my purposes in drifting is to kind of give back and grow drifting through education. And I think part of it was funny. One day, like 15 years ago, I was like, man, I really want to teach people so I don't have to watch bad drifting. and and somebody was like, that's so rude. I'm like, no, like I don't mean it like in a bad way. I'm like, these people that are struggling on the track, I could probably talk to them in 5 minutes and like help them through a year of learning, I'm like, and I feel like if everybody's better at drifting, drifting can grow, right? Because if everybody can link a track and have style and do that, that means anytime someone goes to watch them, they're going to absorb good drifting. And I think that's important in the growth of it. Obviously, it's important to learn as well, but I started doing these YouTube series and some online instruction and going all over the US teaching these clinics whenever I was like kind of in an area already, and kind of just growing and sharing what I learned over the past 20 years. For me, what the best part about current drifting is, someone could start drifting that has never drifted in their life, and in about 5 events, they can be better than I was in 10 years.
Wow.
Which is like incredible to see.
Wow.
Like some people be like, man, I had to fight through this. And I'm like, no, this is amazing. Like, it has grown so much that someone can get in a car that is set up pretty decent, has all the right parts, and there's enough education out there where they can watch some videos and go to the track, and by 5 events, they're going to be shredding out there. They may not be able to win an event or tandem or know the details of it, but they'll be able to link a track and look really good doing it.
We've talked to IndyCar drivers and NASCAR drivers on this program about video games and how much video games have led the way. Sims, frankly. Have simulators changed the way that young folks who you deal with are able to drift faster? Is it just do they have an upper hand because of that?
I think that it's helped a lot in some aspects of drifting. I think it's disconnected some of them. So in the positive side of it, you get to drive any track you want anywhere in the world with all of your friends at any moment. Like in 5 minutes, you can load that up. And that's like amazing, because if I want to go do that in real life, we're talking a whole marketing plan, a car getting shipped somewhere or finding one, doing all this. So that's a really cool experience to be able to enjoy. The other side of it that's good is the rhythm, the timing, and the understanding of it is translated pretty well. So like handbraking, positioning of the car, working the footwork and the steering, for the most part, is accurate enough that it translates really quickly to a real car.
Yeah.
What's weird about drifting, and it's always been the cool thing to me of how it evolves nonstop, is like when you're racing for a time, or you're racing for, against people, like there's a thing where the car with 2 horsepower or 3 horsepower actually makes a big difference, and there's a thing where you have another lap out there, like to improve upon, so you have a 50, 100, a 300 lap race, whatever it is, you can make some mistakes every lap and still win. And you have a quantifiable understanding of the dynamic of the car, because it's leaning, it's pitching, it's rolling, it's doing that. But in drifting, It's like a very skew, weird yaw relation of things. It's the chassis setup is very, very different. The only thing that's even remotely close is like dirt circle track, because there's
Mhm.
wheel spin and you're leveraging the car and you're steering the opposite direction. Um, so I think the games haven't quite gotten that yet, and I hope they do. But I feel like it's a pretty big disconnect on like the feel and the relationship of it, because I can't even drift on a sim. I'm not any good, and
Oh,
I've tried.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I've tried. And I teach a lot of sim kids, to get back on topic. I teach a lot of sim kids how to drift, and I've found like 5 or 6 things that I can teach them immediately that connect them to the car, because most of them are scared at first because of the G forces and the feel of it, and it's actually happening. Oh shit, I can't crash,
Yeah.
like
Right.
things
Right.
along that. Like, and it's cool though, because I see the growth of it, and I just have to break some habits, and I hope that the feel of the sim stuff comes back around. I think in road racing, like when I road race in a sim, I'm pretty good. I'm not amazing, but like I'm there. I could be mid pack against whoever, and we're okay. But in drifting, and I've spent some time, I still struggle big time in that.
Interesting. Are the drivers in the next generation, are they just getting younger and younger like they are in other racing series?
There's definitely some. I mean, I think it's just the mass amount of people that are involved. I think that you see that. And I think you
Yeah.
see sometimes where there is now, in the last couple of years, there is a clear career path where it's possible to have this be funded and maybe make a career out of it. There's very few
Yeah.
that are doing it, but I think
Right.
that helps when a kid is like, "Oh, I really want to be a drifter, or I really want to do this motorsport," and they're pretty good at it, and maybe they come from a background that has some funding, and they're like, "This is what I want to spend the effort at." I think previously, like maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago, that outlet wasn't there. It was Everybody was still fighting to be able to make some money doing it, enough to like keep doing it and live it and have it be a career. I think there's a more clear path of that. So we see some younger people be coming in and having some support from either their family or their partners from another sport or whatever the case might be.
Well, funding, that's always the key, but and that's what prevents so many from getting into other forms of racing. But maybe this is an affordable way to for the path forward, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, like, obviously a pro program might be $1 million a year to run, maybe, but there's a lot of drifting out there that is insanely affordable. And lately, I've been driving some of those events and having fun and doing some competition stuff, where I built this early '90s Mustang Fox body with a current EcoBoost engine. So it's got a stock like motor out of a 2016 Mustang,
Right.
and I built it to be extremely light and extremely simple. And the only thing was like, how do I beat everybody with a car that costs like $10,000? And that was like the build, right? And it's probably up to about 15 or 20,000 over the last couple of years. But it is definitely capable. We've gone places, we've won with it, and everybody looks at it and they're like, "This is so simple. There's nothing done to it." And I'm kind of like bringing that back, where it's like, "Hey, you don't have to build a Formula Drift car when you just want to drive for fun, because I'm here spending $500 a day and having a blast and winning the event while you spend 5,000." So kind of like bringing that ability for other people and the belief of it, so that they can come and enjoy drifting and not have this huge massive budget, and maybe it can just be a hobby, but you can still win and compete.
Electric vehicles. What's your take, Chelsea? How does it affect drifting going forward?
I don't think it affects drifting at all. I think that I wouldn't mind having a bunch of electric cars out there in competitive drifting or fun drifting. One thing that I think the best part of it is the simplicity in terms of the mechanicals. Like, obviously there's some high level tuning and electrical and all that going on in electrification, but there's a lot less moving parts, and it's a much simpler scenario
Right.
than what we're usually dealing with. So that part I'm heavily behind, because seat time and enjoying and driving and having fun without having to do work on the car every 2 or 4 or 6 laps is huge for me, in the accessibility aspect of it. But like as an emotional thing, it's not it for me.
Yeah.
Was it always going to be racing? I guess it was, wasn't it?
I had a very realistic sense of in my approach there. I always knew that that's what I would love to do, but I also saw it as like this, you know, this really, really, really far away destination. I really wanted it to happen. I did everything I could, even when I was karting, all my friends were out, I missed prom, I missed graduation, I missed all that. I was in the garage working on my go-kart on Friday nights when everybody was out, partying and stuff like that. And that's just the way it was. And I loved it. But I needed some big breaks along the way. I needed that Skip Barber karting scholarship to come up right when it did, because after karting, you need some form of money. We didn't have it. You need something to put you into cars and into the next step in the ladder and all that. And man, pursuing a racing career is so incredibly difficult. If you think about all the kids in karting, right, especially in road racing karting, right, it's a huge, huge sport. And you're looking at what, maybe 26 full-time seats in IndyCar. That's right. That's a different scenario than when you look at football, baseball, and these other ones. It's very hard to make it all work. And it was a long, hard road, man. I had to go out and get an investor in my career, and I had to go even through all the Skip Barber days and the karting scholarship and the big scholarship that I won to go into the Barber Dodge Pro Series. It was a long, twisting road that was never quite easy. And as a kid, I always knew that that's what I wanted to do, but for some reason I saw it as I'm going to give it my best, but this might not turn out. I don't know. But head down, you're focused on winning every time that you're in the race car. And that's all you can do, really.
What were you going to do if it just didn't all work out?
I really wanted to fly fighter jets. I always did. That was like my side thing. Yes, that was my thing. Whether I, would have ended up committing to service and doing that, I'm not sure. I can't say because I never got there. I mean, I've been racing from the moment I was 12 years old. This is what I've been doing nonstop, right? So, but that was my other passion, for sure.
So, Top Gun school or something like that.
Something like that, absolutely, yeah. I flew with the Thunderbirds, and when I flew with them, it was the most unreal experience I've ever had. It was just one plane, and the captain I was with took me, just myself, out basically down the Florida Keys, and did like these war training, combat training deals on like tankers that were out there. Blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. The best thing I've ever. I can't wait somehow to get back in one, but I'd say that's probably it. It's probably what I would have done.
Along the way, who believed in you the most? Was it the investor that you just talked about? Obviously your parents, but was it who else was there?
Yeah, my dad, for sure. And I've had so many great people along the way. You hear that from a lot of drivers, is that it takes a lot. Like I didn't come from family money. I didn't come from one big sponsor that put me all the way through the younger category, the junior categories, that put me through the ladder system. It was just always grinding. And I learned, I had to be a big salesman, a businessman off the racetrack, right? I had to sell myself. And then I had to represent those brands that were on the car in a unique way. And I had to kind of reinvent myself a few times doing that, but I can't really put it on any one individual, but if it weren't for my dad and his absolute belief in me and maxing out, 15 credit cards and just doing whatever possible to get me to that next Skip Barber race or whatever it was, wouldn't be there. I can't tell you how close it was to not working out so many times. So yeah, it was his ultimate belief in me, and tenacity. Would not have been able to do it, without him, for sure. So I think that's what I chalk it up to.
No wonder that's what came flooding over you when you crossed the line 10 years ago and won. It all makes sense.
No doubt.
There was another guy, someone who's been on our show here recently, Stefan Johansson, and it's hard to believe, but it's been now over 20 years since you first strapped in what was then the Champ Car World Series to drive for the number 31 American Spirit team, Johansson, Reynard. And
Yep.
was that the launching point for, I mean, you've described it as the big cars, but you were on your way at that point, right?
Yeah, I described it as the big cars because I like to call it an IndyCar. I grew up karting, right? In like 93, 94, right in there, when IndyCar was the biggest form of racing basically going. You had Nigel Mansell coming from Formula One.
Yeah.
To IndyCar. And it was like, this is happening in the US. Like, this is the sport I love is growing, massive. And then right when I got to like Skip Barber, the bottom fell out, split happened, right? And then we have Champ Car, and then we have IndyCar, or IRL as it was known at the time, Indy Racing League.
That's right.
And man, it was tough times that way. But yeah, that's why I called it the big cars, because it's Champ Car. It's an IndyCar though. Just a couple of years prior to sitting in that Reynard, it was a PPG IndyCar. So same thing. But man, that car was so cool. The lines on that car were just incredible. I actually have a model of it over here. That Reynard, and that was back when we were shifting with the with the sequential shift, taking the hand off as you're loaded up in the corner, and you're one hand in this beast, and such a fun race car to drive. One of my favorite for sure. And it looked it. I mean, it was that American Spirit livery was that classic, American looking, scheme. And it was just incredible. But yeah, that was my first year. And then that team folded after that. I went to Herdez to be teammates with Mario Dominguez. So learned some Spanish there as well. And I had my big breakthrough win at Milwaukee, where we started on pole, led every lap of the race. And that was really what caught the attention of the bigger IndyCar teams. That was kind of that was the next big point. I won my first year in 2003 in the Reynard at Surfers Paradise, Australia. Let me tell you, one of the best places aside from Indy. Have you ever been to that race, Surfers Paradise?
No, I've been to the Melbourne Formula One, but I've not been to that race.
Oh, it is incredible. Absolutely incredible. But won that race, and that was certainly a special moment. But winning Milwaukee really put me on the map.
Well, and then you just happened to work in 07 for a guy who's been on this program before, Bobby Rahal. And you drove for Rahal Letterman Racing in the number 17 for the final few races as a replacement in 07 for Jeff Simmons, right?
Yes.
What was that like driving for Bobby and really then for Dave?
Well, Bobby's another one of the, I've had the opportunity to drive some of the legends in our sport. And growing up, I always just naturally rooted for the Americans, because IndyCar was such a global sport, right? There was so many different countries represented that I really rooted for the Americans. I rooted for Bobby. And this is another one of those breaks I was telling you about, one of those key moments where all of 06, I had no job. Pretty much all of 07, right? This is about 3/4 of the way through 07. I was pounding the pavement. I was testing NASCARs. I was doing a whole bunch of stuff, but I'd go to these IndyCar races and I would tell these owners, I said, listen, if you put me in the car, I will capitalize and I'll do a better job than the guy that you have in it. And I remember talking to Scott Remke, got a lot of respect for him, miss him every day. He was in my year. He's the team manager at Rahal, super special guy. And forever grateful for Bobby. When he called, he said, hey, you want to come meet with these ethanol folks? We'd like to consider you for this seat. And man, it was game on at that point. My first ever race with them was at Mid-Ohio, which is their home race. Okay.
Yep.
Mind you, right? It's right outside of Columbus.
Yep.
And I hadn't been in the car in a year and a half, and David Letterman shows up. So all of a sudden I was like fully in the spotlight, back in this is my first time in the IRL as well. It was just an incredible time. And the next year in 08, we won at Watkins Glen. Big win. First time Rahal had been in the in victory lane in quite some time, quite a while. I don't remember
years. Yeah. Hadn't been there.
Yeah. So that was a massive deal for the team, for myself, for everybody involved. It was just an incredible time. Very special memories of that time. And like I said, I'm forever grateful for Bobby giving me that chance. It's a cool story in the end.
Wow. Did you get a chance? Did you get any one-on-one time with Dave?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I got some one-on-one time with him, and it's funny because it's just like he is on the show. Like he'll have a conversation with you and he'll say something, and you don't know if he's serious or not. It's so dry, right? Everything, and you're like, this is my boss. And at the time, I'm like, I just really want to keep this job. But he'll throw out the sarcasm and just completely catch me off guard. And I remember he's got such a passion for it, man. Jeez, that's what the sport's about. That's what this culture is about, right? That's what racing's about. Is that it's not just, hey, I want to be a team owner, and Mr. Big, he loves the sport. He loves IndyCar racing, and that's his passion. It's really cool to see.
Every driver and owner that I've had on this program are some of the nicest people that I've interviewed. Are drivers the nicest athletes out there? Period. I mean, maybe hockey players might be close, but
I think because it's not a stick and ball sport, right? It's a very unique sport. Like, what other sport do you have where you have all the fans sitting there talking, slapping the driver on the back right before he gets straps in for the biggest race in the world, right? The level of accessibility to us is something I think we're accustomed to, and we are representing the sponsor. This is at least how I see it. We're representing the sponsors that are on the car. They're not just sticking a decal on the car, writing a check. They expect a certain level of representation, and you are out there. Whether you're at home, at the racetrack, away from the racetrack, you represent those people in that company and the people that are putting their faith behind you. And I've always felt that you have to be open. You want people to be more a part of this sport and things like that. I think that might be one of the reasons. Now, are they nice to each other? No. Drivers are extremely selfish. We're programmed to beat our teammates, even though in the US and IndyCar, we work with our teammates to a certain extent because we know that can help us set the car up in a quicker, shorter amount of time in a more efficient way. But like in Europe and F1, your number one enemy is your teammate. It's dog eat dog in that way. So two sides to it, I guess you could say. But I think racing's unique in that regard, and that we're expected to, and we are more accessible than most athletes in major sports.
And come from, as you said, in some cases, humble beginnings, and appreciate a lot of, appreciate the path forward, appreciate hustling for sponsors and the business side of racing, which a lot of people don't see. Everything that you just described that they have to go through. Inside the car, I think our second or third guest three and a half years ago was Jimmy Johnson. And he talked about having to going from NASCAR to IndyCar. And I actually talked to him in Detroit at the track. And he said, man, it is, where is the power steering? Why is this
seriously
hard? He was getting absolutely pummeled especially on a street circuit in these cars. How do you stay in shape between Indy 500s, and how did you stay in shape when you were running the circuit all the time?
Well, that's the thing, is that number one, I have a huge amount of respect for Jimmy, right? He's the man, right? 7-time champion. And then he comes completely out of his wheelhouse and puts himself on this grand stage of exposure, right? Yep. So potentially he's going up against guys that have been driving Indy cars for years. And he's throwing himself into this. I mean, I'm not quite sure how many people actually would do that, honestly. And I'm like, man, you have some big cojones for doing that. That is really cool. And I respect the heck out of that. He's such a great guy, but I really do. I mean, that takes a lot of guts, and that's another one that's just driven by the passion of the sport. But that is one thing about IndyCar that nobody will really get. And it's unfortunate because there's no way of, you can go pick up a football and understand that, what Tom Brady does is difficult, throwing a ball accurately, 60 yards down the field or whatever, and getting hit by these big guys. It's more something you can relate with because you can pick up a golf club and understand you can't do what Tiger Woods does, that type of stuff. But in IndyCar, the physicality of it is incredible. I mean, we would lose. I had some races where, I lost 10 pounds of water weight, and my heart rate, I was wearing heart rate monitors as well, in qualifying up to, 180 beats per minute. In the race, sustained 160 plus for hours.
Wow.
And drenched in sweat, and it's just with no power steering. Not only is it heavy because you've got these massive Firestone slicks on the car, but the kickback through the wheel, like you mentioned, Jimmy was getting beat up on the street courses because they're bumpy, right? And every one of those bumps you go over, it's like a go-kart, right? That feeling of that direct linkage steering, times 1,000, because the kickback through the wheel is what really is physical. You've got all that weight, but it constantly is doing that to you. And you put the car offline in some areas, by an inch, and you're off in the marbles into the wall. And it's just, you have to drive it on the edge with precision while absolutely getting beat up. And the car's basically driving on the ground as well, right? We run those cars so that on the straights, they're bottoming. And, some of those tracks are not very smooth, and you're getting these like compression hits in your spine and things like that. And it's a crazy physical experience. And I wish we could somehow relay that to people more in a more effective manner, but there's really no way to do it.
So how do you stay in shape now between Indy 500s?
I've kept with my same trainer that I've had for many years. And for me, it's all about mixing it up, right? It's not with drivers. It's a lot of core. It's sustaining, right? When you're going through a corner with sustained G's, like on a short oval, we do almost 5 G's, right? So it's a lot of core work. It's a lot of shoulder work for that. Like I said, the weight of the steering. Any IndyCar driver that first gets in it, right? Nico Hulkenberg got in at Barber, went for a test, and was gassed as well. It's a certain level of weight and heaviness to the steering wheel. Meanwhile, you're undergoing all these G's. So it's about that core work. It's about your shoulders, upper body, and really cardio. Just a lot of cardio. I've always done a lot of swimming, running, these things. And the best shape you can be in, though, is the maintenance workouts. But when you're in the car every week and you get into race shape, there's nothing in the gym that can really that can prepare you 100% for it. But being in the race car is the best thing. And I find like karting is really good. I still do that. I have a 175cc shifter down in Homestead in the heat. Just continually staying on top of it. But Indy is not one of the most physical races. Indy is the most mentally draining. But when it comes to road and street courses, yeah, it is crazy physical. Scott McLaughlin posted his heart rate from Portland actually for the whole race on Twitter just the other day, and he was right up there, 100 right at the start, 160 or more beats per minute for basically the whole race.
Wow. And mentally, how do you prepare for a mental race like Indianapolis? How do you train for that, right?
I think it comes with experience, honestly. I don't know. I've never done any, just years and years of racing and being in really, really pressure, being in positions where I knew if the outcome wasn't good or if I didn't do well or bring the car home in one piece, that I wasn't going to have a job. And just compartmentalizing things and focusing on the right thing is huge, right? So much of it is up here. How you start your day. If you start thinking, oh man, I don't know if I can pull this off, this is a big deal. This is a big race today. Or, you open the window and it's raining. And, oh shoot, it's raining. Why can't it just be? You have to right then just retool your brain. Think, this is a positive for me. I can do this, and then go back and think of those other rain races that you've had where you've succeeded and what you did and what it felt like and why. And it's the same thing for Indy. You can't let the nerves get to you. You can let the nerves get to you in a positive way, but channeling positive thoughts. Once you start going down a road of negativity or doubt, it'll have you. It just grips you. It's instant. Just like they say when you're driving a race car, if it gets loose, right, and you're trying to save the car, if you're looking where you want to go, you're going to go there. If you look at the wall, you're going to go to the wall. It's just like that, simplified. But I think over years of being in certain positions with pressure, with the championship on the line, with the race win on the line, this, that, and the other, it kind of gets you prepared for a moment like the 2014 Indy 500 at the end there.